Hey everyone, welcome to the Only Land Fan Show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest tonight is Clint Turner. Texas native, land expert, and enthusiast Clint Turner is an in-the-trenches operator of a multi-million-dollar land investing business. Through his authentic, no BS approach, he provides free training through his YouTube and Facebook group. Through his consulting company, Learn.land, Clint provides high-leverage education, marketing, and recruiting services to other land business owners looking to scale from 6 to 7 figures. Clint, thank you so much for joining us tonight. How are you?
I am good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you
Okay,
perfectly. Thanks for
good.
joining us tonight.
Dude, thank you. I had a call with my community like 40 minutes earlier, and my Wi-Fi was working fine and the computer was great. And then they started construction on my street, and all of a sudden it fell apart, but I'm glad it's working.
Oh man, I'm so glad to have you with us. I'm glad that you're able to jimmy rig something that way you can be with us tonight. So I want to just jump right in. As you heard, a lot of people earlier on the call are very interested in a lot of the areas that you specialize in. So let's start with a little bit of background. How did you get started in doing land deals?
Yeah, so I started doing land. So I graduated college when I was 21, and I did not enjoy what I was doing at all. I'm gonna flip my phone. I hope this works okay. And I think we're good. I did not enjoy what I was doing at all. And so I was actually doing a few different things at the time. I was putting ATMs in like new gas stations and old bars, buying the ATMs and putting them in. A couple other like YouTube, social media, passive income plays, if you will, because that was all the rage. And land was one of them. Land was one of the things I found out about, I think through like a podcast or something of the sorts. And I had just kind of like did what they said very quickly. I sent some mail out. I think I sent a few thousand letters out, and I got a deal where I bought it for somewhere around $1,000, and I sold it for 1,500 down and like 250 a month on terms. And I was like, oh, this is like like this is cool. I could see those stacking. I could see this business growing. And so I kind of quit everything else I was doing. I sold the ATMs off. I was flipping a house with a friend at the time. She pretty much went all in on land. And yeah, it took me a few years to kind of find my way. But eventually a few years later, I quit my job and I've been doing it full time now for the last 4 years.
Nice. So what was it about land that had you decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to forget the ATMs. I'm going to forget the social media stuff, the house flipping, and land is where I'm going to be.
Um, it was I had a very clear like I wanted to get out of my job goal, right? And so I needed to be making enough for the business to run and then enough to get out of the job and replace that salary, which in hindsight was really not that high. It was like a lot easier to do than I thought, but that was kind of my first goal. And so like I just, I think as you go farther down the journey, you think about things differently. But at that time, I was just thinking, how could I stack enough income through something to where I could consistently replace, say 15 or 20,000 a month. And land just seemed like it made the most sense. It was what was paying me. Like I was making money doing it. I had other deals going at the time when I did that first one. And so um, I don't know, it just kind of clicked for me. It made sense. I could see myself doing enough, like selling these things and building up enough cash flow, if you will, on the note side to replace my job. And so that was the mindset that I started the business in. Not necessarily the one I'd recommend to like everybody else, but that's how I started, and it just made sense to me. It was consistent. The other things I were doing were very lumpy, and so yeah, I just kind of jumped. I kept making money, and I kept having fun doing it. So
Nice. Yeah, perfect reason to keep going with something, right? So, how did you mentioned YouTube? You mentioned kind of finding different avenues or gigs, if you will, on YouTube. But how did you go about learning the land space? Did you have a mentor? Did you have a coach? What did you do to get started in learning and growing your business?
man, everything's out there for free if you just look, or for very cheap if you want. And so that was where I was. I've never really been scared to just like try something, like I am very categorically the guy who would like his bank account would swing to zero because he was like trying a new venture, right? So it was pretty easy for me to just want to try things. And so I kind of started just learning from YouTube. Like YouTube was where I'd pick up a lot of information. YouTube, podcast, whatever was free. And as like anybody that was talking about land was all talking about the same thing. It was like you pull a list like this, you send the mail like this, you do the deals like this. I'm like, oh, I'll like stumble along. And I've always thought that if I brought somebody else a deal, like they would probably help me and help me figure it out. Right. And
Right.
so that's actually how I did a couple of my first deals is I was just like, I was finding deals and somebody else was funding them and I was running the whole thing. Or I was actually finding them, funding them, and somebody was more or less selling me their like advice to make sure it went well, which was fine. And yeah, so I just kind of started that way, and then I started getting traction, and I'm a fan of coaching and education, and so I've done all the major courses and programs, um, and yeah, so pretty much all of them, I guess would be the answer now. Probably about every course there is out there. There's a lot of new land educators and influencers out there. So I haven't probably seen all of them, but it's not that complicated of a business. And so
Right.
kind of
Right.
learned from YouTube, and then I did some coaching and some education, and then here we are.
Nice. Here we are. So tell us a little bit about about your land business now. What types of deals do you specialize in? Kind of what was your journey through that to where you are now?
So I started through one specific. I don't know. I think there's niches within the land space. There's a lot of different deals to look at, and so the niche I was first exposed to is one that kind of led you down this buying and selling desert squares, buying them low and selling them on terms. And so that's what I started doing. I did that for like 3 years. The challenging part is I never really made enough money doing that over those first 3 years to make like a real impact. Like I was working my main job for most of the time, and then I quit once because I thought I could, and then like reality hit like really hard, and so I got a job with my competitor who are that's a whole other story. But and so it really took me like 3 years, and that's all I was doing was that model was buying. I call it the red ocean, just like the desert squares out in, and some of them are nice, depending on where you're looking, but just buying land really far away that had already been subdivided, or just lots that we could pick up cheap, and then really honed in on financing. And so I sold 500 or 600 notes at this point. I currently hold, I've been buying a little bit of them lately, so I'm probably close to 200 notes that I hold now. Um, and that business is great after like 3 or 4 years, right? Like, like now I consistently know I have $60,000 a month coming in from the notes, but it took 3 or 4 years of everything basically to invest in the business to get to that point. And so depending on what your timeline and your goals are, most people's isn't to wait 3 or 4 or 5 years. So that's why I say I would have done it differently looking back. But hey, a deal's a deal, right? So that's what I started with. We were doing a lot of notes, still do notes. I like them just because of the like. I could go on a whole tangent about the yield you get as like a first lien asset backed, like especially a good land note, like you can get crazy yields for pretty low risk in the spectrum. But anyhow, we can talk about that if we want to. But I like notes, and so I started needing more cash infusions into my business because I was spending all the money I was making on more properties and more marketing and more people. I never was really like getting ahead, just doing that strategy, if you will. So then I started. I just found someone on Facebook, and I just like pretty much offered to work for them and like do deals with them and help them fund deals. And they just kind of coached me for a few months. And I saw that they were doing a lot more deals where they were making 20 to 50K and like flipping them and making the money back, like making the cash, right? And so I was like, oh, that sounds like the answer to my problem. And so I kind of started going after properties like that, sub 150K, things we could buy at 50% ish of market value, and flip them to a little higher end buyer who could pay cash or get their own financing. So we started doing that for a few years. And then the past couple of years, we've been doing all of that. Plus, we started doing more like subdivide, minor land split type deals. So the business kind of does all right now. It's kind of been through a journey, and I like all of the different niches for different reasons. But yeah, I know it was a long answer to your question. How's that Hope that answers it.
No, yeah, that's fantastic. It's always, I love seeing how different investors get into the business and then how they start evolving. And we typically tend to evolve through necessity, right? Like, oh, I'm saying that if I'm ready to scale my business, then I'm going to need to do X, Y, Z, or here's a problem. I need to find a solution that a different type of land deal or asset can provide. So it's very interesting to see that. And so thank you for sharing that with us. For those of the listeners that are not really familiar with sort of what you were talking about in terms of your first type of deal doing desert squares, can you walk us through a little bit about what the process was? Were you using your own money? Were you buying on owner finance and trying to sell on seller finance? What was that like?
Yeah, so generally you'd be targeting paper subdivisions that don't have a ton of utility. So, like, if I go outside of Dallas where I live, and within an hour of Dallas, anything that's got access to water, power, and either septic or generally gonna be septic, like it has a utility value. People within Dallas want that land because they want to use it. It's very reasonable to drive 40, 50, 60 minutes to a property, and not as feasible to drive 3 hours to something with no water, no power, poorly maintained roads, things of that effect.
Right.
But there's a buyer pool for people who still want land, but are just in that financial category. And so basically the best thing they can get is the lot that's 2 or 3 or 4 hours away from the city. And there's so much gosh dang land out there. If you just think about flying over in an airplane, like all that stuff's owned by somebody, right? Some of it the government, but a lot of it individual. There's just so much volume of land once you get out there. And so really you're looking at buying like 5, 10, 20, 40 acre lots, sometimes two, 2.5, or even down to one that have already been subdivided, but there's just less actual use, right? Somebody's not going to it very often. They frankly probably have never been to it or have been to it once or twice. They don't have the attachment that somebody has to a house, right? Like when you're trying to wholesaler buy a house, it's the roof over someone's head or it pays them X amount of months. So there's a real attachment to it. This land that's like out in the middle of nowhere that sometimes people don't even know where it is or how much it's worth or how they own it half the time, honestly. Um, it's easier to find deals, right? And so I just kind of started doing that. And the weird part about doing that super unincorporated, less utility value type land is like the average common sense is like, well, who's going to buy that, right?
Right.
And I just kind of blindly followed, like followed the leader on this one. And there is a significant amount of buyers out there, especially when you can offer somebody 5, 10, 20, 40 acres for a few $1,000 down and however much a month, right? There's a whole sector of buyers, I promise you they exist. And so that's really what we were looking at. We pull all the data, insert your data service, use data tree. We find other places where there's these already done subdivisions and just go market to those super unincorporated type lots out in the middle of nowhere. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I do love the idea of, seller finance because it opens up the buyer pool tremendously. People that may not be, in a financial position to put down, thousands of dollars just for a lot, it now opens up that opportunity for them. So, what type of buyer outside of the financials, their financial situation, what other criteria or type of buyer did you find were buying these lots? Like who buys a desert square out in the middle of nowhere and what did they use it for?
Mhm. It would depend. There's like low quality desert squares and high quality desert squares, I'd say. The higher quality ones, you generally got like a use case, like somebody that went to the property, enjoyed it, and says they're going to use it, right? Even though it's 2 or 3 hours away from where they live, or maybe they live in a smaller town that is only an hour away from the property, right? Kind of depends. I've also on the other extreme had people buy property from across the country. Like people buy property from me that are in a different country. I don't know, like there's so many different buyers. There's a good chunk of it that's like the RVer, the off-gridder, the person who just wants to own land, maybe eventually sees building a cabin or doing something with it of the effect. That's a good chunk. But there's also just a bunch of people out there that, like the types of people that have bought land from us, or just the weird randomness. Like we sold a property don't know why this one comes to mind, but we sold a property in Pueblo, Colorado. Somebody who had never been to it called us. It was like $190,000 property. It wasn't cheap. Like they called us from Pennsylvania or New Jersey. It was New Jersey, and just said they'd been looking at it for a while. They had their friend drive by and they liked it and they wanted to buy it, but they didn't want to close their title company. So wanted to send it. Okay, and like within 3 days, we had just done like a off market closed $190,000 property. I had no clue, but once the deed signed and money transferred, it's not really my problem, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of different, and probably people might not disclose all the time what they want to do with it, but
Sure.
it's kind of that like big chunk of the free birds, if you will, the RVers, the van lifers, the um, want the cabin in the woods type deal. And then the other half, I don't know, kind of weird.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the reason I ask that is because obviously it's always good to kind of have an idea of like who we're marketing to and where can we
Mhm,
find a particular type of person. But it reminds me a lot of I used to do when I first started real estate investment. I got my start doing wholesaling single family houses, and I had a mentor that told me one time like you can't be thinking about these houses like the house that you're going to live in because it will completely you know
yeah,
devastate your negotiation. And yeah, you wouldn't live in this, but maybe someone else would. And so you have to kind of
mhm,
suspend that. And so listening to you talk about that reminded me a lot about that of like, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't want necessarily a piece of landlocked desert square, but that's not to say other people don't. So if you're listening to this, like keep an open mind, right? Like that's kind of what I pulled away from that was keep an open mind about the types of buyers and types of
mhm.
deals that you do, right? So shifting gears a little bit, can you talk about sort of like what was the largest land deal you've ever done?
Um, so this deal was a middle of the pandemic or like just that time frame where the market was crazy. And so it's that old saying of like, you can't like it's not timing the market, it's time in the market, right? That kind of deal. So I've been doing this for 6, 7 years at that point, and it had only really been looking for deals like this for a couple years. But we just found ourselves in the right situations where we were able to basically buy. There's three deals I'm specifically thinking of near the Austin Bastrop area, so you're familiar. Or the time where we were marketing and acquiring, it just worked out really, really well for us. We had some deals that were really sticky, like some 19 heirs with some judgments and things that had to be removed type situation. And there were also some deals that just really benefited from the right announcement at the right time. And so, we had a few deals that we did in there. Those deals ranged, there's three of them I'm thinking of, that were kind of between the $1 to $1.5 million acquisition price and basically doubling our money on them. Two of them we just basically papered up as minor subdivisions. 'Cause in Texas, you can cut a lot into 10 acres with like an email approval, basically. Like nobody can really tell you no unless there's a really good like public safety reason to not be able to do it. And so we papered it up like that, got all the bids for the construction, and we're able to sell it to an investor. And we did a couple more deals like that. We had one that benefited very greatly from when God, I should remember this. It was it Samsung announced this super big facility that's coming up kind of towards Taylor,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Um, Out that direction. We had a property that did we were very just lucky by that announcement. We probably made 3 or 4 times more money than we should have on it. But that announcement and its proximity to that deal, that was a deal where we were, well over a million that we made on it without doing anything to it. And then
Wow.
we got kind of greedy and we did a few more deals like this and realized they're not all going to be that easy. And so for some of the next deals, we didn't just get to paper it up and do nothing. We actually had to put roads in, we had to run power, we had to get the land cleared. Where really all the stuff is very simple once you think about it and compare it to any other asset like multifamily, house flipping, any of that stuff. Pretty simple work we're doing here. But yeah, like some minor improvements we've had to do to most of them since then. But yeah, the biggest one we did, we made a little over 1.5 million on, and it was kind of just we did buy it and close on it, had a loan and everything, but we flipped it to the end buyer within like 60 days. And those truly, like, I wish I could say it was all talent, but those were just like, I was in the market. I was doing this for a long time, right place, right time. Right.
Right.
Um, And since then, we've had to really reset expectations. But I do like that model a lot of buying big tracts of land and cutting it up, because flipping is a very like you're always hunting, is what I like to say, right? You're always hunting for another good deal. And what's it going to look like in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? When you buy big tracts of land, you cut them down, you know how much land you have to sell over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. Makes the business operations a little more fluid and systematic, right?
Right.
So yeah, to answer your question, that was my biggest deal. We had a couple lucky strikes, if you will. But I do like that model of buying big tracts and cutting them up.
Nice, nice. So what was sort of the, doing a deal that size must have been daunting, especially if it's your first large deal like that, right?
Yeah.
And so what was the light bulb moment that went off for you that you realized like, okay, I can do these big deals, like it's within my capacity? What was that mindset shift like, going from that desert square starting point to now you're doing, over $1 million in one transaction?
I wish I could say it was just like it's just like, oh, just like grit through it, and it's like I was scared shitless most of the time,
Right, right.
like that first really big deal we did. It was like 11 months, I think, from the time we first talked to the lead to when it closed to when we finished everything and sold it and money hit the bank account. It was a long time. So I thought about that project, like, because we had basically $1 million in bank money, and we had about $400,000 in investor money. It was brought by one investor. So that's one thing I will say, is that like having a great partner, somebody who can put money together that quickly, was huge, right? It gave me a lot of confidence to be like, well, hope this doesn't suck, but like I'm gonna try it anyway, right?
Right.
Is having a good relationship with somebody, and that didn't come from like a phone call or a Facebook post. It came from us doing probably 100 deals together or something like that, right? Where they'd made a lot of money, and smaller and larger deals. They basically trusted enough to put up for the loan and to put up all the equity for the loan. And so it made it easier. um, but again, like anybody can send a deal to me, and if I send it, like if I see a deal like that, I'll put my money into it. So I think it's not as hard of a problem, but it's something people should keep in mind. Anyhow, how did I transition? Like it was like scary, dude. I thought about that deal basically, and like there were starting to be signs of, like, I don't know, it was obviously a very in 2021, it was a very like uh who knows what's going to happen next month with the market, right? Like, is it going to keep going up? Is it going to drop off? And so it's like riding a roller coaster, honestly. And that first one went through, and like, then it kind of clicked, but it still isn't like, I don't take lightly when we have a bunch of investors capital, or when we have a bunch of, like, I'm very selective on the deals we do. But the mindset of going to it, man, was just like, there's this opportunity out here. I have this know-how of how to do land. It really doesn't change that much when you do bigger deals. So I knew I like wanted to get there. When the opportunity came up, just kind of had to go for it.
Just do it. Just do it afraid. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Well, I also think, you mentioned that there's a part of your personality that is very much, start it and then you'll figure it out as it comes. And I
Mm,
think that is so important. A lot of people, and I know I fall into this category a lot, and I think a lot of it has to do with how we're conditioned through school and through college, is that a lot of people feel like I have to understand every single step from A to Z before I even
mm,
start the process. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to do it, right? And so
mhm.
I love hearing that idea of like, no, just like act on the information that you can act on, and figure it out. It will come, right?
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
I mean,
So
like, it really is. We don't like, I didn't know how to do that deal when I just looked very simply at, well, we're buying it for this much, and I'm pretty sure I can, because like just go on the lands in America in most areas and look at 300 acres versus 10 acres. Like there's just a spread on them. I was like, well, it's this much, and there's a lot of road frontage, and we can definitely cut it down to this much, and I'm pretty sure they're worth that much. So let's just go for it, right?
do it.
And just like, yeah, like do it afraid. That's a good way to say it. It's very much how it was. it's how
That
it's
is
how it's always been. But it
that's
is my personality. I'll go to zero to like try something if I really like believe it or think it's gonna work. So
Well, I think that's so important because a lot of people want to try things and they're like, well, I'm gonna just put like one foot in the water. Like you
Hmm.
have to jump in, right? To like figure out if what you're doing is actually, a proof of concept, if it's gonna work,
In that
Like
deal, I probably had 150, maybe it was like 180,000 I actually had in that deal at the end of it.
so
Because
you had
I
skin in the game.
Oh, I had skin in the game. Yeah, I don't want to make somebody think like somebody else brought all the money. We could have structured it that way, but like, when you're working with somebody, and I'm used to putting money in deals, and I was paying for a lot of the post stuff too, right? Like improvements and plans and engineering and things of that effect, and all stuff. I had like 180,000 in the deal. Things worked. Like I put my money. Again, we're not the first people to do anything generally, and so like there's other people out there doing it. When you really start looking, uh, it gives you a little bit of that confidence. So.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I mean, it sounded like you mentioned there was 11 months from the time you got the deal
Mhm.
contract to the time it closed. So it's not like things were moving so fast you couldn't at least research or ask around, what do I do next? Right.
Yeah, and that was the deal that actually had 19 people involved in it,
Oh my
and
God.
so we ended up spending 40 or $50,000 in transactional attorneys that we really didn't need. Like looking back, I'm like, oh, okay, we really didn't need to spend all that money. But there was so much going on, and like when you get into big deals, contracts matter a lot more. And so like getting the right contract and all the right parties and people, it was a nightmare. And so that deal drag out for a long, long time. It wasn't all under contract; took a few months to get there. But yeah, the amount of time it was on my mind was a lot.
I can imagine, especially with over $1 million riding on that. Man, that's incredible.
Mhm.
So, um, what would you just say to someone whose big goal is like, I want to do $1 million deal, but I'm terrified to do it? What would you say to them?
It's not like the sexiest answer, but my general like thought is if you like pretend you're like you're that person you want to be or where you want to be, right? If you approached somebody, because again, that deal I talked about, in my opinion, I don't know if it works if I don't put a bunch of money into it, right? And so, like realistically, if I didn't have the capital and the time and energy and all that kind of stuff to do it, and I didn't have a track record, and I went to somebody and asked for a bunch of money, like you think they're going to give it to me? No. Hopefully,
Right.
they look at the deal. They'll probably try and take the deal from me through assignment because they don't trust me to operate it, right?
Right.
And so, um, I've been on the other side of this feeling for a lot, but like the truth is, you just got to be like honest with where you are, right? And to do a very big deal like that, you need to spend a little bit of time ahead preparing for it, right? Because when I do a subdivide deal, but like we do our contracts, we have 90 days of due diligence and 30 days close after that. And so, very much like you said, we put a lot of deals under contract because we can cut them out, right? Because we have 90-day period, 60 to 90. And so during that time frame, like there's a lot of checklist items that have to happen. And one of them is get like financial commitments, like who's doing all the money here. If I sign an $800,000 contract, well, we need to figure out who the hell is going to pay for that, right? Like, is the
Right.
bank going to pay for it? Which equity investor? Do we have them like at their word? Close, right? We have a second lined up because again, we get into this contract, different things to that effect. Finish line, pretend that they can, right? That's where you can get in a lot of trouble. I can tell you about a lawsuit I'm actually in right now. There's all sorts of different things, right? And so being very honest with like where you've been, I think it's so much easier to do smaller, medium-sized deals. Like you just get a lot of you get a lot of confidence from it, right? Like
Right.
if you can sit down and show an investor, hey, I've done 10 deals that have made between 25 and $50,000. Here's how I've done them. And I think I want to do this big deal, right? Are you interested? Like that's such a more realistic pitch than some random person who found you on Instagram or Facebook who's like, hey, I got a big subdivide. Like I get that stuff so much just because we have a little bit of an internet presence. I have to send it all to my team, right? I got to send it all into the regular pipeline and I don't know if it's going to make it out, but people who have my ear, who really know me, that I trust, if they bring me a deal, I'll be on the phone with them. Right. And so
Right.
doing a big $1 million deal like that, you really need to know how you're going to close the deal and what's the business plan. Right. And if you don't think you got those pieces in place, do that first. And also, like, you need some proof of concept too. You got to, I would never recommend somebody do a $1 million land deal if they've never done any other kind of real estate. Right.
Right.
But on the other hand, Kendall, because this is probably part of your crowd, like I've seen these multifamily guys come in from doing, big swaths of single family or multifamily, and all they want to do is the big deal, right? So it really like comes down to the confidence and then the true ability you have to close and perform on that deal, right? Because a lot of these are $500,000, $2 million acquisitions. In your mind, it's easy. Somebody will fund it, the bank, whatever. It's a lot more work actually getting it done and getting everybody on board and structure and all that kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So that'd be my thought. It's like really easy to do deals that make you 15, 20, up to 100 grand just flipping. I do some of those first before I jumped right into doing like $1 million deal.
Right. Right. Yeah. Mindset is huge. And I think you hit on something that was really important was when you said, a lot of the guys that come from the multi-family or commercial space, they want to do the really large deals. A lot of that is mindset is because, they're used to talking about numbers that are like, 30, 40, $100 million deals.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they don't have the same amount of hang up of like, oh, we're going to do $1 million land deal. They're like, $1 million, that's nothing. Let's do it. Right. And so,
Yep.
but it's that mindset that creates the reality. And also talking about, like you mentioned, having the experience, because I think you really do have to have the framework of experience and mindset to know that this is a reality and this is where you can operate, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really, really good point. So how do you go about, I know that you mentioned, you had relationships with investors, but how do you go about raising money for large land deals?
I'll tell you what I teach my clients that's never not worked. Okay. It's very simple. You gotta like proofs in the pudding. So you gotta have some proof. You gotta have done some deals, grinded through to actually have the proof to show people. So that's the first thing. I don't advise people to go raise a lot of money unless they've like got a little bit under their belt, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is you can upload you can go to a software called Google My Maps. Okay. You can create a little spreadsheet of your deals. Simple things. You need that lat long. You could have like an address to the pictures of it. You could put buy price, sell price, return on investment, like little bips like that, right? You can upload this all to a little custom Google map with a link, and then you can show people it, right? And so that's how has never not failed is if you make the map, do the deals first, make the map, and then make a list of 20 people, hopefully outside of the land network, but if you got to start in the land network, that's cool. And be like, hey, I want to take you out to coffee, or I want to like chat with you, catch up with you. Notice I'm not saying I want to get money from you, right? I'm like people who I think are genuinely going to be interested in what I'm doing. Like, hey, I want to catch up with you. Maybe we could talk about business over there too, right? Go into that meeting, show them the map, talk about what you do, and don't ask for money. Okay. Because if you pick people who just generally are business aptitude and they look at land deals, they're like, is that 100% yield? Then 80%? That's what? It's just so proportionally different than what most asset like class investors are used to. You sit down and do that with 20 people, it's very hard to not have a bank of money, right? Or a bank of people that want to do deals with you. So until that doesn't work, that's the advice I give everybody. Do the deals, create the little map, sit down with a bunch of people and show them the map. And then from that conversation, it almost always leads to, well, yeah, when there's another opportunity available, like I can keep you in the loop, right? And that's
Right.
how I've always done it. It's how I've done it with my biggest investor. Don't go into it asking for money. Go into it like you're like showing what people are like. You're just connecting, right? It's more of a relationship thing than anything. You probably know that, but that's how we do it.
I love that. I love that. Not asking directly and just sharing what you're doing. And like you said, if they understand business, they'll look at this deal and be like, I want to be involved in that in some kind of way. That's incredible. So
And Kendall, you know this too, because we're on this call. Land is like people get interested in land.
Yeah, yeah,
There's like some weird underlying thing, like I don't know, of just owning land, like being connected to it. And so when people hear you're doing land, you're always very like you're one in like a bowl of other people doing houses, and you become like people are actually interested. I see so many people growing their business think that no one's interested in what you're doing. Everyone's actually very interested, especially other investors. When they hear the kind of returns you're making, like just asking somebody who you just know on the fringe of your network, or maybe through a like an introduction or something, just saying, "Hey, I wanted to I'm meeting with some potential clients, or I'm meeting with some colleagues to show them, uh, uh, kind of like to show you what we've been doing in our land business, how we're generating these returns." If you're an investor, like this could be, and then say you're not asking for money, right? And just like really build a relationship with people who have money and have that business aptitude. It's just yeah, it's such a unique asset class. If you sit down with enough people, people want to give you money and get involved.
absolutely. Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible. Which was one of the many wonderful things about land. And so I want to piggyback on that question and ask. So I know a lot of people are always like, if they're in the position where they do want to raise capital, they're always on the lookout for opportunities to raise capital, right? So when you are in a cold situation, like let's say you're out at a dinner, or you're at a mixer or something, that's not necessarily business related. You're just out and about, and someone asks you, "So what do you do? What do you do for a living?" How do you respond to that?
It's a lot easier to understand subdividing land. And depending on the like situation, if I think it's funny enough or not, I might say I make big land, small land, and then people will ask questions about it, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. But if not, I generally just tell them I'm invested in the land space, and then I let the conversation flow from there. If they want to know more about what we do, I'll tell them. If they don't, they generally won't ask.
Right, right. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier, a lot of people are interested in land. Like it's just
Hmm.
it's an interesting sort of, I guess, REI niche right now. And so when you say land, that perks a lot of people's ears up. So I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. I make big land, small land. That's awesome.
Yeah. And people
Awesome.
are like, wait, what? Tell me more. If they care, they're like, wait, I don't get it. Tell me. And then we talk about it.
Nice.
Right.
Nice. So, um, where do you see the market going now? Like, I know obviously a lot of people are talking about the market is shifting, and so where do you see the market going now, and how do you plan to pivot or adjust your business to meet that market so you thrive in that upcoming market?
That's a good question. I think it's just going back to a normal market, and there's going to be a rough, bumpy period that we're in right now. Um, so I'm just one of the big tactical things I can say about this is like any talking head's opinion on what's going to happen with the market is worthless, in my opinion, right? Whether it's mine or yours or someone on TV or whatever, like generally that's like mass consumer sentiment is what's going to shift the market one way or another, right? And
Right.
so hoping that there's not another COVID style mass consumer sentiment event where everybody starts, is very focused on one thing. I think we're just headed back to like what investing looked like in like 2015 to 2020, right? It was just like there was, because this will flush out a lot of folks who have been operating, um, more or less by luck and timing, which is great, like more power to you. But it really does take money to run a business, right? And that will balance itself out. We'll see less players in the market, I think. Land buyers, the challenge is most land is not owned with a mortgage, right? And so um, they don't have an actual reason, like they're less attached to it overall. But most land, since it's owned with no debt or anything against it, they don't have like a financial obligation to give it other than taxes, but most land taxes are like nothing, right?
Right. Yeah, they don't have
Um,
a monthly payment that they have to make up, right?
yeah, like we have a property we're buying right now that's like we're buying it for $1.2 million. I think the property taxes this year are like $400 on it, right? So there's
Wow.
like nothing. It's like it's ag zone. There's very little holding costs. So unless there's a real scenario to sell, that's what's generally always been the market, and that's what the market will go back to, right? think a lot
Right.
of people are trying to play in the like, again, if you look outside, like in a 60-minute radius of Austin, you'll see land, like go back and look at sales comps from 18, 19, 20, like 15K an acre was like a generous, like a nice solid number, 10, 15K. Well, now people want like 25, 30, 35K. And there's a lot that's come on the market because everyone's chattering. It's like, oh, I can get 30,000 an acre now. And then now the whole, like now there's all this supply of overpriced land,
Right.
right?
Right.
So what's always worked from day one is having the nicest property that can be listed or be able to play in that ballpark. It doesn't have to be the most beautiful, but like have a property that's similar in features to other things that are for sale. So like trees and access and all those kinds of stuff, right? And at the lowest price point. Because that's always I've been doing this for so long. I've done a lot of different marketing checklists and paid ads and agents, no agents, the whole spread. The only thing that really moves the needle with land is price. It's the 80-20, it's the 90-10 even, right? Making sure buyers understand like what from the listing where they're going, can get the feel of like what it's like with that property. That's the other part. The other 80% is price. There's like nothing else really that's super important. And so we're just being very conservative is what we're being right now. I think prices are what I'm kind of seeing as a trend is like if you look at prices 2018, 2019, 2020, some of them have like doubled, but I think where it's actually stabilizing and where you see transaction volume is somewhere around like 20 or 30% higher than where it was then, right? Whereas it may look like it doubled or whatever in value, 10, 15, 20% somewhere in there of what it was worth in 2019, 2020 is one of the things is one of the ways we're valuing land in 2023, right? Um, and then just being very conservative, seeing what's on market, make sure you're going to come up as a competitive listing. This is all the stuff we did back in the day, if you will, in 2017, 2018. It's like, well, you don't like, you want to make sure if somebody else can sell the property for 3,000 down, that you can sell it for 2,000 down, right? Or like whatever that, like that always moves the needle. Not much else does. And so I just want to make sure I'm super competitive in whatever market I'm listing in. Um, and not getting too hyped up with like the comps from the last couple of years.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. So when dealing with like the acquisition side and dealing with sellers who have a really super overinflated sense of what their properties are worth, how do you deal with them? Are you just kind of letting them learn over time that yeah, no one's really paying that, you're asking much, or do you try to educate them, or what's working for you on the acquisition side right now?
Well, two questions there. So, like, how are we educating sellers who won't budge or who want way too much for their land? Generally, somebody in that category, it's just not worth our time, so we're not going to try. Um, I don't know that this is a official workflow in our process, but if a deal is like really going sideways or like we really think some data could help, you can send sellers comps, right? So if they're asking way above, if they've agreed that like they understand you're a business and makes money that buys land below market value and sells it, and then you can really get them anchored at that price point, like that could work. But most people who have the inflated sense don't have any of the things we talked about. They have no reason to sell, and they don't have like significant attachment to it, so it doesn't matter either way, right? They're indifferent, and it's very low holding costs. So why would they do anything? So less focused on them. What I'm going to do with them is I'm going to try and educate them as much as I can, and then I'm going to put them on like a 6-month drip. Generally, that's like our farthest out drip. It's a 6-month drip until they just, unless they send some super, we've seen some bad stuff, but if they like generally don't like, probably when it comes shoot my house, like if we text them again in 6 months, we'll probably put them on the 6-month list. Like if we had any kind of conversation with them, even if it was like, you're way off, right? Put them on 6-month list. And then for deals, well, let me just stop there. That's what we'll do for people that don't have a ton of interest in selling. Just put them on a long-term drip. What is working for us on acquisitions right now is just like, again, if you look at the house wholesaling market 10, 15, 20 years ago, 5 to 15, 20 years ago, it's kind of gone through this same evolution of like, you just got to get a little better at marketing, is my opinion. And so the little better at marketing is just going deeper. Like when I worked in software sales, when the marketing team generates a list for you, you don't send them all one postcard or send them two postcards a year and hope the business comes, right? In software sales, you like annoy the ever living shit out of people until they answer your call and take your demo. And that's like what the game is. And
Right.
so you got to kind of think about that in the same way when you're going after land now, I think, is getting a little more selective and then going a lot deeper. So like we're doing a lot of texting and ringless voicemail at the beginning to lower our cost. And then we're doing unique, different mailers that stand out from everybody else on the back end of that. And there's all sorts of other little stuff we can sprinkle in there and text follow-ups and old lead follow-ups. There's a lot going on in that system, if you will. But that's what's been working pretty well for us is like a deeper approach. And then using some texting or ringless voicemails on the front end. Texting is where we've been very heavy. We're not super experienced in RBMs. Um, Using that on the front end to kind of lower our overall marketing cost. And anybody who does respond, because we get a 20 to 30% response rate through there, you know, just for anybody who's operating a land business or sees this, a quick way to save money, because again, you got to operate like a business, is somebody scrubbing your data for properties you'll never buy anyway. And then texting first can save you thousands of dollars a month. Like for every scrubber, my COO has calculated this, for every scrubber that we hire that we need, we save like a few $1,000s a month, even though it costs to pay them to scrub full time for us. We save that much money because they're bringing out that much property that we would have spent marketing on, right?
Right.
And so you can really get your list a lot more focused if you scrub down all the like super wetland, super floodplain, super slope, bad access, no access, get all that out of there, right? Now you have like half the list, sometimes less. You can go really deep and send more text, more creative mail, things to that effect. And so, I've always been a believer that this is a marketing business. This isn't a real estate business. Like you just got to know how to do the deals. But at the end of the day, marketing is what wins. And so we're just always changing the marketing, always trying to figure out what's working. And going deeper has been working for us, but we change it up a lot. So who knows, right? That's what's working right now.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Um, I think you answer so many questions when you start asking yourself through that lens of, okay, if we are a marketing business, then how are we going to get leads? How do we find buyers? I mean, if you filter it through, like what is effective marketing, it answers so many problems, so that's a
And
real.
also people think that like people think land investors are just like we're just this unique breed. Well, if we're a marketing business, do you know what businesses have been around for ages? Marketing agencies, right? So if you
Right.
can see how a marketing agency runs, maybe a really high level wholesale operation, that's pretty much how your business should look, right? We're not special flowers. We just need to be like, we need to be kind of, that's my favorite thing to tell people is like, my business looks like a marketing agency. Like we have a side, we call it the agency side of the business
I
because that's what
love
they
it.
do. It's like they're a marketing agency. We decide where they want to go and they market to the people there, right? That's the secret sauce of the business. You know, pretty much everything else you can pay somebody to help you. You can pay attorneys to help you figure out title issues. You can pay title houses to close. You can pay realtors to sell. Most of that stuff you can outsource, but generating the deals and working them is the hard part, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what types of like what criteria do you go after when you're looking for land deals? Obviously, there's lots of different types of deals out there, but if we're looking for, let's say, subdivision opportunities, what's your criteria? How do you choose a market? How do you find where you're going to start marketing?
Yeah. So it's gonna very much there's like not a straight answer to that. Um, I think one thing people need to really figure out first is what your marketing budget is. I think that can drive the answer to this question. If you have like, if you really get that you can spend a bunch of money on marketing and make a bunch more in deals, and you got the team and everything to execute on it, and you got the money to actually do it, then you can go that route. But most people don't, and so having a realistic expectation of what your marketing budget is, I think is super important, right? And so kind of working from what your marketing budget is, that takes you into like how much mail do you send or how many text messages or what's my strategy look like, right? So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but that's kind of how I think about that.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does. I love the way that you really allow the 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 business and the business approach and the business plan to drive the types of deals that you do. I think that there's a lot of people out there that just kind of like have a shotgun approach where they
Yeah.
just like, they're not targeting very specific based on what their business can actually handle. They're just looking for
Yeah.
deals, right?
And like, if you want to make 100, like, or if you want to make $50,000 on a deal, rule of thumb is like you're going to buy at 50% or so. So like a very simple thing is you just need to go find areas where land's selling for $100,000 in a market that you like. Like it's not, there's no rocket science to this. It is going on and setting your filters in Zillow or land.com and just seeing where are properties listed for this amount, right? Because I'm generally going to ask to buy them at around half, maybe a little more, and I'm going to sell them closer to this value. And so it's not like there's not an overarching secret, like super sauce that we do to figure it out. I just want to notice land move in that market. And then if so, I want it to be in a price range that makes sense for what we're searching for. So if you want to make $250,000 a year, it's really not that hard. And I know I say this with like a grain of salt. I'm not trying to sound pompous, but it's doing 10 deals, less than a deal a month that make $25,000 a deal. If you can really reverse engineer based off that, anybody can make $250,000 in this business, right? Whether you're picking your phone up and calling, right? You're calling and texting from your cell phone. I have a client who didn't have a CRM, didn't have anything that a standard business would have. He operated off of his cell phone, which wasn't even an iPhone, it was an Android, and off of like this, oh my gosh, this legal yellow pad. And he'd write all the deals down. He would go through and he was doing this infill strategy. He would scrape, write all the deals down. And then anybody who's interested in selling, then he'd call builders and he would line them up on paper. But the dude came to me because he wanted a little more business about it. And he had done like $1 million net, like the previous year, just operating from a cell phone. He told me he probably made 10,000, if not multiples of that phone calls, right? And like just all the time. But it shows that it can be done, right? Because if you have a $8,000 a month marketing budget, you can use some higher leverage tools like some VAs and texting, some mail to get the message out. If you got a $1,200 a month marketing budget, then you probably should be like doing something that fits that, like cold calling and texting, either from your own phone or working a software that allows you to get more leverage, get more leads out there, talk to more people, right?
Right.
And so yeah, it's really about choosing the kind of deals you want to go after and then figuring out how much realistically right now in the next 3 to 6 months am I going to spend on marketing. Not some like I wish I was here, I want to be doing this. Like if it's $800 a month, it's $800 a month, right? You know, to build a plan around $800 a month. If it's 2,000, whatever it is. We're a marketing business, that's what brings us deals. And so once you have that number, you can commit to it, you're gonna do it. Then you just reverse engineer how much time do I have to spend and how do I want to send that kind of marketing out, right? And so I think everybody's business can be fluid. I have clients who have and friends and colleagues who have dozens, if not hundreds of teammates. I have one colleague who's like pushing like 70, 80 people on his team. I have other people who want to make $500,000 a year and like travel, right?
Right.
So figuring out really how it works for you. And then again, I'm just a big fan of like have a business plan, have a marketing plan on how you're going to actually do this thing that you want to do.
I love that. Being intentional about where you're putting your resources and not only your money, but also your time. Like what can you realistically, can afford time-wise to be able to implement a plan. I think that that's so important. And so I love that point. For someone who's listening to this, maybe they are, a solopreneur or they're like a one-man band where they're doing everything. What would you say to those people who are looking to scale? Like, let's say they've done some infill lots, they're ready to go. They have a little bit of a marketing budget. What are some of the areas that they need to be focusing in and like the first steps they need to do to start scaling their business?
Thank you guys in the comments. I'm glad to provide a little value. And I think the question they just asked is exactly what you just asked, Kendall. So hopefully I
Oh,
can answer
awesome.
that.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, if you're getting started today and you got a small to medium marketing budget, um, you know, again, like I wish there was a super straight like answer to it. The first thing I would say is like judge your risk tolerance, okay? Because if there's no reason, I'm a big fan of, you know, 75 hard and like grunt and work 80 hours a week, I'm I'm a fan and I love people who love to do that. But if you know it's going to be super stressful on you to like be managing, like trying to be managing 60 projects a year or 60 flips a year, like don't set that as your goal, like that doesn't have to be the goal out of the gate. So I'd say like take a realistic approach to where you are, because if you're at zero or at have got a couple deals working or you're in that range, maybe you've done a couple deals, the entrepreneur in us wants to say, all right, I gotta be doing 20 grand a month. I gotta be doing 10 deals a month. Like that's where we go. Right. But
Right.
realistically, I've seen my business roughly double every year, double or triple. So if I did like 6 deals in the first year, realistically, I could probably do 15 or 20 in the next year, even though I was like, I'm gonna do 100. Right. It really like that's what it turned out to. It's like year over year, almost without fail, we've somewhere between 2 and 3x. Right. And
Right.
it's like, regardless of how big of these goals I've set, that's realistically where it is. If I were on a lower budget right now, I definitely start with that strategy. Like literally, you can go, and this would be super like no money, but you could go to a county assessor's website. You could find properties. You could look them up on truepeoplesearch.com. You get people's phone number. You could text them and you could call them. That is a way that is, unless I'm missing something, free to actually start getting in front of owners, will take a significant amount of work and it's going to take a lot of time. If you've got a little more money, maybe you could invest in a software like what's that one we use? Launch Control. So we use like there's a few blast texting softwares out there. Texting is probably where I'd go for a small budget because you'll actually start talking to people and you'll work some deals. If you got more of a budget, mail is good. Mail done right is even better. So not just sending the same template that you see your friends sending or you see that one program gave out, but actually hiring somebody, developing a few different templates that like kind of, I don't know, whatever resonate with you, look different, have different ideas in them. Um, that's a great high leverage tool because it's push button goes out versus text messages. We can only send 3, 4, 500 text messages per head count a day. Those are full-time VAs because you get such a heavy response. You got to work through it. And like,
Right.
it's quick. It's like right now it's quick. And so again, depending on where your budget is, that would kind of define how I'd say you'd start. I would probably, again, depending on risk tolerance, I'd probably start looking for deals that are maybe slightly below what I just talked about, that like maybe deals that are worth 20 to 50,000 gross sales value on the retail side, right? Start with deals that are there and just really hunt to find a good deal or two where you can buy it at 50% below or better, right? Because that's going to put a little bit of cash in your pocket. You're going to make money from doing that. And B, it's going to give you a lot of confidence. That's where I would start if I were starting from kind of a no man, like kind of from a hybrid or like from nowhere. I'd set realistic goals, try and do a couple of deals like that within 3 to 6 months. And then like I think if you beat that, great. You're like ahead of the curve. You're ahead of the hundreds of people I've seen. And if not, sometimes it takes people a little longer, right? But that's where I'd start. Going to give you some confidence. Then your next few campaigns, you can start looking at bigger flips. And then there's a whole nother side of this thing that's like notes and that stuff. But that's how I'd start.
Awesome. Awesome. So if you had to say like your top biggest surprise in your land journey once you started, thus far, what has been one of the biggest surprises about the industry or about people or just an observation that you've made? What's been one of the biggest surprises for you on your land journey?
Yeah, sure. A biggest surprise in the land journey will answer. Just want to tell Catherine in the comments, that's how I would do a 1K a month. That's what I think is a solid plan. Start with more grunty tactics that are like call or text because you can do a lot more of it. Just want to make sure I answered that. And I'll answer her other question about roads and such at the end of the call.
Yeah, we do have a question and answer period, guys. So we will be getting back. We will get to your questions, I promise.
So for the most surprising thing about um, land is because again, I'm not like I didn't grow up hunting or like we fished a little, but I'm not like we go camping a couple times a year. I'm not like a land guy. I didn't grow up like harvesting the land and like that's why I do land, right?
Right.
It's like I just got into it because it worked and there was money to be made. And then, I started to really like it once I kind of got into it. But man, I don't know. It's tough. It's like there's been so many things that surprised me. I didn't know there was such a big market for land. I had no clue. Um, like I think I run a pretty big business and I'm like scratching the surface, not even making a slight dent in the overall market. So there's a large market for land out there. There's so much land. Uh, there's so many people that don't care that they own their land. And so like if you can get in front of them, especially at the right time, there's a lot of opportunities there. And one thing that I'd really say that I've learned and has surprised me over time is a lot of investors think of land as risky. Okay. And that sentiment comes from a lot of failed housing projects in like the 80s and then the '08 crashes, right?
Right.
There were a lot of belly up land developments. And so land kind of got this like um for that single use of building single family homes, kind of got a bad rap. But land done right, in my opinion, is one of the lower risk asset classes because we're rarely entering a deal anywhere near market value, right? So we have like that whole. I'm going to two property auctions tomorrow. I've been to some of these guys' auctions before. Literally, they just like these properties will just go sell for what they're worth, right? They'll go up, and people will pay more at these auctions than what they're worth. But anyhow, say you need to buy or sell a property. We're generally buying land at 50, 60 cents on the dollar. And so we generally are pretty protected on our downside.
Right.
Um, and so banks and investor sentiment generally is land is risky. When I think like anything done right, land actually our model is like very low risk. Like I hate to say this, but I've I haven't lost money on a land deal. Like if you and it sounds like so pompous to say, but there've been plenty of deals that if you really factor in how much money we spent on it, what the cost of that money would have been, how much marketing we actually put into it to get it sold. When you put that all on a P&L, I would have some losers. But HUD to HUD, from where we bought the deal to where we sold it, I've never not sold it for more than I bought it for. And so we've done so much volume, like it's like cemented in my mind. As long as you buy right and you do this business the right way, it's actually pretty low risk. And so I don't know. Those are some of the things that I've learned along the way that, people think but aren't necessarily true, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So what is your what would you consider your superpower to be?
Oh, that's easy. I'm very good. Like if you know the visionary integrator side of business, I'm a visionary. 100%. Got to embrace it. Got to know where my downfalls are. And so I'm really great about like ideas and plans and stuff of the sorts. But I also think my superpower is like really putting the systems and teams in place in order to do something like high leverage and repeatable. So my superpower in land is finding deals and then building the team to do the deals. That's where my superpower is. Where my superpower is not is managing those people or like sales training or like the stuff that's very in the weeds where like a really good HR manager, administrative assistant, operations manager, wherever those people operate are not where I operate generally.
Right,
Right.
right, right. I
And
get
so I'm like, I cannot tell you how much my business has grown when I really like emphasize, like I really accepted that I suck at a lot of the things in the business and I need like other people that are like, better than me doing those things.
for
Right.
sure. Yeah.
And I know that's like a little down the path for a lot of people, but I'm very much, I live on that side of things where I could talk all day and we could come up with ideas and like, I'll send Jeremy, who's on my team, is one of my main COOs. I'll like text him ideas all the time. And, sometimes they're good and worth acting on. And other times they'll be like, classic visionary. Like, can we table this one? Can we talk about this in like 6 months or something? I'm like, yeah, sure.
We'll add that to the
Um,
long-term project list.
yeah, yeah.
I
But I
get
really
it.
like building the teams because the marketing is simple. We're archaic with our marketing methods. And so like I've really enjoyed building the teams and putting the right people in place to where like this thing kind of runs like a machine.
I
Right.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important to lean into your power and like know your lane and let people, get out of your own way and let people
Hmm.
who are better at certain things do those things and do what only you can in your business. So that's really really incredible. So what would you consider your biggest passion, or like what's the biggest goal that you'd like to achieve in your life? What are you like, what lights you up?
Oh, we're really going deep here, Kendall.
Yeah, we are.
It's changed so much over time. I'm a very obsessive person, so like when I get into something, I get into it like deep, right?
Right.
Um, it's it's a blessing and a curse. There's kind of two sides to it, but long term, like if we were really talking about that, that's more like family and kids and like long term investments. I'm really passionate, and I've grown a lot more passionate lately for like how, because land's a high cash business, right? And when you've been doing it for a while, you start to get these like really daunting tax bills, and you start to like, I got to figure out what to do here, right? And also, frankly, you just have cash, and cash is not good to just be sitting around. So I've been very interested in how to build like a longer term portfolio through land. That's really what I think a lot about right now, is like, what does the end of land for me look like? Not that I'm like leaving anytime soon, but there will be a reality on like, I don't know, somebody said this to me, and this does not have to be you, but I don't know why it just kind of clicked with me. Like I just had it for a while. I was like, by the time your kids, like, they don't remember much before like the age of like 4, right?
Right.
And I grew up with like, having a lot of issues in that department, right? And so I'm very like ingrained to like, I don't want that for my family, of course.
For sure.
And so where I think and kind of act at, like, I don't know what consumes a lot of my mind right now is like, how do I take the money I'm making here and the success, and like, thank God, that we are where we are, but how do I turn that into like, to when I do have kids that are 2, 3, 4, 5, getting in that range, like, doesn't mean I have to like spend all day being a dad, but I could if I wanted to,
Right. The
right?
freedom to be able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's financial goals and business goals that we want to hit, but they're kind of driven by that idea of like, when I get in that age range, I want to be able to more or less set a portfolio. And like, I play golf with this guy. He's crazy, dude. He has like over $20 million, and most of it's just sitting with Goldman Sachs, just at like 4.5%, 5% a year. But he's making like $1 million a year off of money.
Right.
He cares nothing more about like, what angle does his 7-iron like launch the ball at, right? That's all he cares about. And so he's super happy with his money there. I wouldn't be like that. I wouldn't be that passive, but I would like to know that at some point when I get into that phase of my life, that I've made enough to where I can, live a comfortably happy life. I've made more money already than I ever expected to. I like to say that because when I was asked when I graduated high school, like, what does like success look like for you? I was like, making $100,000 a year. That's what
Oh,
it
yeah.
was.
Yeah.
And like looking back, I'm like, that's so funny. It's like a different mindset, but I'm just very blessed. And that's kind of where I think about these days. I also play a lot of golf, so I think about golf too.
There you
If
go,
I'm going to
man.
be honest, yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, before we go into our question and answer period, I just want to thank you so much for giving to us today. And the question that I have is, how can we give back to you right now? Like, what resources or what connections are you looking to make?
That's a great question. I have, that's a good question, Kendall. Nobody ever asked how I feel, so I appreciate that.
Of course, man.
We're always looking for people who are. Oh, here's one thing. There's a lot. There's a big issue in the land market, in my opinion, on like, we talked about notes a bit, and people will go out and do a note strategy, and then they have all this money built up in notes that they can't access. That's cash flow. One thing I've realized lately is that market's breaking down and getting easier to access. And I'm actually in that game too. So if anybody has notes or does notes, like, we can literally buy your note at the closing table. Like if you sell a property on terms, where I can buy a note from you. Right. So I'm looking for opportunities there. I'm looking for investors who are interested in that kind of market, kind of a longer term play I see with land too. Anybody who's interested in doing subdivide deals, if you have that or people of that, we have a lot of opportunities. Um, and like, I'm super, super, super selective on my criteria, and I don't do a bunch of projects. And so like, I have deals a lot of the times I'm kind of pushing away. So if people are interested in assigning like assignments of subdivision opportunities, that's something they can, those are relationships I'm looking to make as well. And I'm always looking for people who want to invest. Right. So
Awesome. Yeah. And how can they get in touch with you if they have any of those opportunities and they want to partner up with you, how can they reach out to you? How can they find you?
Yeah, we have the consulting side of the business, and then we have the actual land side of the business. So if you have land stuff, it's clint@unlovedland.com. You can find me there. If it's on the consulting side, it's clint@learn.land. I respond to most of my emails, or at least get them in somebody's hands that will respond to them. Um, and so that's how you can get in touch with me. Also, just like follow me on social media. I'm trying to put out all of my like as much free land content as I can this year. It's like my big goal. I finally was like, all right, I'm gonna do the social media thing.
Yeah, I see you
Um,
killing it with like the real. Yeah.
gotcha. I had done like I just have to delete it off my phone. And again, like I'm not good at marketing, but you can hire people who are good at marketing and then just like, be a little involved and like anyway. So there's I have weaknesses too, but
I love it. I love
um
it.
yeah, man. So yeah, like just like you can follow us on socials. We're gonna start putting a lot of free stuff out on YouTube. You can check us out there. And then yeah, if you're ever looking to partner on deals, do deals, reach out to us. We love to work with folks.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for that. If you're interested in hearing from other 6 and 7 figure land flippers about how they've built and run their businesses, then check out my group, OnlyLandFans, where I do a live interview each week inside the group. You can grab that link at the description below. Until then, be great, have a great week, and catch you in the next one.